first, I was surprised, but right away I got real scared. I was lying in bed, a dark shadow in the night. I was so tired because I was working very hard then. I wanted to go to school, but I had no money. I kept waking up because I was thinking so much about my problems. I heard a noise. When I turned and tried, I could not move. My bedroom looked the same, but I could see in the corner a dark shape was coming to me. It came to the bed, over my feet, my legs. It was very heavy, like a heavy weight over my whole body, my legs, my chest. My chest was frozen, like I was drowning. I had no air. I tried to yell so someone sleeping very close to me will hear. I tried to move, using a strength that I can have. I thought, what if I die? After a long time, it went away. It just left. I got up and turned on the lights. I was afraid to sleep again. That was an account from a 33-year-old Hmong immigrant. Some of the greatest stories are often inspired by real-life events. In an October 2014 interview with Vulture.com, Wes Craven recounted, I read an article in the LA Times about a family who had escaped the killing fields in Cambodia and managed to get to the US. Things were fine, and then suddenly the young son was having very disturbing nightmares. He told his parents he was afraid that if he slept, the thing chasing him would get him. So he tried to stay awake for days at a time. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought the crisis was over. Then they heard the screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got to him, he was dead. He died in the middle of a nightmare. Here was a youngster version having a vision of a horror that everyone older was denying. And that became the central nightmare of Elm Street. This seems to be one example of spate deaths that became known as sudden nocturnal death syndrome, or SUNS. They occurred amongst East Asian immigrants in the late 1970s, early 1980s, primarily affecting a group known as the Hmong. In 1981, the Centers for Disease Control began trafficking a mysterious rash of sudden, unexplained nocturnal deaths occurring in apparently healthy male immigrants from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The problem, unknown in other ethnic groups, has now claimed more than 104 men, averaging 33 years of age, and one woman. 98% of the deaths occurred between the times of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. In 1981, the peak year of these deaths, 26 men, often Hmong refugees from the highlands of northern Laos, died in their sleep. Usually victims were simply found dead, but when medics arrived quickly, the men's hearts were fibrillating or contracting wildly, a symptom Paris said may result from numerous possible causes. The Hmong were a people of Laotian immigrant origin who had fought for the Americas via CIA funding during the Vietnam War. It is estimated that as many 10 times more Hmong died during the Vietnam War than American soldiers. When the U.S. left, they were abandoned to fend for themselves. As the Laotian government fell under communist rule, the Hmong became targets of the regime. This forced them to flee under the risk of death, or even worse if they were imprisoned in re-education camps. Some of those who fled ended up in the United States, many in California. Sudden nocturnal death syndrome. The main features in the Hmong cases were almost all the dead were men, just one woman died, aged 25 to 44, median age was 33. They were recent arrivals, median time 17 months. They all died or at least became seriously unwell during sleep. No obvious abnormalities were found on the autopsy. The basic theory behind SUNS was, and still is, that the Hmong men were dying as a result of an extreme stress response during episodes of sleep paralysis. It is quite common and seems to result from the natural paralysis that occurs during REM sleep, spilling over into a more wakeful conscious state. It is almost like the brain is stuck midway between dreaming and being awake. One of the known triggers is stress. The paralysis is quite terrifying in itself and is often accompanied by visual, auditory, and other sensory hallucinations. One of the common experiences is of being attacked or suffocated by an evil entity, often referred to as the old hag in Western countries. The interesting thing about sleep paralysis is that very common and that other than the fear it induces, it does not normally cause any harm. It appears in the case of the Hmong, something was more occurring. The struggles and difficulties of fleeing persecution to come to a new country should not be underestimated. Hmong refugees have experienced a host of hardships, including language, and employment problems, changing generational and gender roles, survival guilt, and trauma-induced emotional and psychological disorders. These changes can affect all Hmong immigrants in varying degrees, but Hmong men in particular have had their roles dramatically altered. It has long been believed and even recorded in the medical literature that extreme stress can cause sudden death. That is sometimes referred to as the Nocebo Effect. Excessive production of stress hormones can in certain cases cause death, most likely by their effect on the heart. Whilst Tako Subo seems to be predominantly affect women, there may well be a particular subset that affects men more. Perhaps the Hmong have a particular predisposition towards something like Tako Subo or some form of heart condition abnormality which can be triggered by extreme stress. Further, as word spread of such deaths in the community, the Hmong men started to do things which may have made the situation worse. There were reports that some of them were using alarm clocks to wake them up regularly during the night so that they would not sleep too deeply. Some were even trying to avoid sleep altogether. This likely resulted in sleep deprivation, a known factor that increases the risk of sleep paralysis, enhances the release of stress hormones, and generally puts more strain on the body, including the heart. Paradoxically, by trying to reduce their risk of dying, these men may have actually increased their probability of suffering sleep paralysis and succumbing to SUNS. Shelley Adler presents some interesting cultural context which may help to explain, at least partly, why the Hmong may have had a more extreme response to sleep paralysis type phenomenon. The traditional Hmong spiritual beliefs contain a form of spiritual panpsychism, the idea that all things have a consciousness or spirit. On leaving their homeland, the Hmong felt that they had been cut off from their ancestral spirits, which would previously been able to protect them from an attack from evil spirits. In interviews with refugees, it became clear that many Hmong feared that the ancestor spirits who protected them from harm in Laos would be unable to travel across the ocean to the United States and thus could not shield them from spiritual dangers. Solace was taken, however, in the conviction that the myriad evil spirits who challenged Hmong well-being in Laos would also be prevented from following the Hmong to their new home. Among these evil spirits assumed to have been left behind was the nocturnal pressing spirit Dub Sog, pronounced Da Cho. It soon became frighteningly apparent, however, that this notorious evil spirit had made the journey to America as well. In their native country, the Hmong would traditionally make sacrifices to feed and placate such evil spirits. This practice stopped when they moved to America, as one Hmong immigrant told Adler, at least once a year those evil spirits must be fed. If someone forgets to feed them, then they will come back and disturb you. If you have a song sum, the ancestor spirit is to protect you. If you feed the ancestors regularly, then whenever you have song sum, the ancestor spirits will protect you. It seems that the Hmong's belief in the dub song or song sum may have had them interpret sleep paralysis as being an attack by such an evil spirit. This, combined with the belief that they were no longer under ancestral spiritual protection, may have left them more prone to excessive fear and hence an extreme, potentially fatal response. Though Hmong women do experience nightmare attacks and are aware of the roles of both spirits and the absence of traditional religious practices via sons' deaths, they are also known that Dab Sok seek out their husbands, fathers, or brothers as the individuals held accountable. The mystery of sons in the Hmong population during the 1970s and 1980s is a fascinating one. Although we have a strong idea of the likely contributory factors, this particular mystery has never been conclusively solved. There may have been some sort of environmental trigger which resolved and the immigrants spent more time in the U.S. It is also possible that modern cardiology is able to detect and treat more subtle heart abnormalities in childhood. Ultimately, it is likely that the combination of the news of the deaths with the Hmong spiritual beliefs created a compelling and frightening narrative which resulted in behaviors which may have made the situation worse. It has also inspired multiple newspaper headlines, drew the attention of the CDC, and led to the creation of one of the great horror film franchises of contemporary times.